Welcome. This is Mama Tales, a podcast on our collective motherhood journey. I'm your host, Sally Courier. I'm glad to be back after a short hiatus, but it was necessary. I took some time away to work on what I'm calling Mama Tales 2.0, which means that I'm changing things a bit. The podcast will still be the show you have grown to love, but with a few upgrades. The biggest one being that there'll be no more production breaks. You can count on new episodes coming your way every week. To be honest, when I started this thing, it was meant to be every 2 weeks, but I kind of feel brave enough to shoot for every week. I am super stoked about that, and I was busy at work figuring out how that would look like on my end. I am definitely excited to go on this journey with you. And to make sure that nothing passes you by, make sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Mama Tales Podcast and subscribe to the newsletter. New issues of the newsletter go out every other week, and they're usually personal essays from me and hopefully in the near future other contributors on things that matter to us, as well as some highlights from the podcast and the community around us. We are kicking things off with an episode that I truly enjoyed working on. Let me take you a bit back. For Mother's Day this year, I had my mother on the podcast and she shared her own story of motherhood. One of the things I asked her was if she regretted anything or would have loved to do something differently. To be honest, I wasn't expecting much, but immediately I was done with the question, she had an answer. After that recording, I remember looking back at that question and wondering how I would answer it, say 20, 30 years from now. What mistakes was I afraid of making as a parent, as a mother? And if I made them, would I stand behind them? That was a tough question, and instead of answering it alone, I invited listeners to sit down with me to answer this. So in June of this year, our first ever event happened, and this episode will share the conversations that we had with the moms and dads that were present. Listen to this.
I have to work. Part of my work is a lot of traveling. And then so it's kind of like, will he think, I saw her like once a quarter or whatever. Like, what's the memory he has of me?
So for me, my first fear is making mistakes in their upbringing. In this sense, what I mean is like spoiling them, not instilling the right virtues. Who am I raising this person to be? What's the end product of after 18 years? Will they be able to live life without me being there?
But before we jump into that episode, I want to introduce you to a brand new segment on this podcast. I'm calling it my highlight of the week. And in this segment, I'd ask you to submit something that has been a highlight of your week. Just send me an audio note on my Instagram page or write me a note in my DMs. I think this is something that is important to think about, especially in the moments where things seem a little too bleak. My highlight this week definitely has to be something that has literally just happened. My son, he is, I want to say 15 months. You see how crazy it is when the second born comes. You can't even, you have to really think about the age. Anyway, so he's around 15 months old and he has been impressing us with his vocabulary. I know a 1-year-old shouldn't really be having a vocabulary, but I think maybe his sister is pushing him to a point where he's getting one. Anyway, so he's in the office. He took my water bottle and tried to drink out of it, and he wasn't really able to. So I think he got frustrated with me trying to help him drink from the bottle. So he just turned away and went towards the kitchen. And this is what he said. He said, Tata, that's the name we use for his nanny. And he said, Mai. So he's like, Tata, Mai, which means, Tata, give me some water. I was like, this boy just made his first sentence. That's so crazy. So yeah, that has to be the highlight of my week. All right, let's just jump right into it. To help me answer the questions on the potential mistakes I would make as a parent, I set up an event dubbed The Sit Down that took place on a nice, cool Saturday morning in June. We had a mix of moms with really young kids, some with older kids, a mom-to-be, and a couple of dads. We sat down in a semicircle and started the session by sharing our own individual fears and embarked on a journey to see how we can face those fears to feel more confident in the choices that we make as parents. One of the expectations I put out there was that I wasn't going to be able to give anyone specific answers to their fears, but maybe collectively we could get insights on how to deal with them. So in this episode, I will guide you through this session, and if you want, you can take the time to reflect on the question as well. Let's dive in. So we're going to start this conversation here. This is my mother. Her name is Anne Kuria. On the screen, I put up a picture of my mother smiling in a restaurant somewhere in America. She is a very interesting human being because for the longest time, and I think we have this with our parents, they are, still our everything, our points of truth, our points of safety. And that is what my mom represents to me. However, as I grew up, and I'm a mom as well, I started seeing that she was not perfect. And it was very unfair for me to hold her in that high standard. In the last couple of episodes that I did on the podcast, and these were Mother's Day specials, I asked my mom if she'd want to be on, and it was a very resounding yes. It's like she was waiting for that moment. And I think for her, it came at a point where she was very reflective about her parenting journey. She is currently out of the country. I have a younger sister. She is 25 and living her own life. So she was all alone. My dad passed away back in 2015. So she has a lot of time to herself. And I caught her at a time where she was very reflective about her parenting journey. Because you set out this journey with all the best intentions, but things do come up. I know she struggled, especially with my sister, for a very long time, and she couldn't figure out why. So in one of our recordings, I asked her a question that I thought she would skim over and possibly be like, what type of questions is this are you asking? But I asked her one key thing, which was if there's anything that she regretted doing as a mom or something that she would have wished she could go back and change. And this is what she said. Anything you wish you knew earlier about parenting or something that you could have done differently?
By then, we did wanted to dictate who you become in life, who you associate with, because we don't want you to follow. We feel like you walking with so and so, you behave like how you like him. So we are there telling you cannot, but we are not giving you reasons why you should not do such a thing. We are here telling you, no, you cannot be a doctor, and you're not giving somebody a reason why she should not be a doctor. So parents of our time, we had issues of liking to dominate the lives of our children. And that is why most of them have become rebellious. Instead of giving a child guidance, we were stamping it on them. You have to go to church. You have to do this. Back then, it was what worked for me, not what worked for you. Amekataa kunisikiza na ni lazima ajue I am the mother. She has to do it. But I'm not giving a listening ear. So if I was to go back to parenting today, I would love to give a listening ear to my child. Listen to her reasoning. Then you reason together. The only thing as a parent you're supposed to give is guidance.
I can let you know that if I asked her that question maybe 5 years prior, that would not be her answer. But she was character developed, right, by my sister. Because I grew up very hyper-independent, right? So, and that was because a lot of attention was drawn on her. Because for some reason she wasn't going exactly how they wanted her to. But I was alone, right? So I grew up very hyper-independent. And she realized all the attention that they gave her to try and mold her into something that she wasn't, backfired. So by the time she stopped fighting with it is when she started really thinking about it. And that's how she came to this conclusion. She didn't even hesitate when I asked her that. But one of the things that I noticed when she said that, there was a lot of acceptance. in her answer that, you know what, maybe I made a mistake, but it was I made those choices with the best tools that I had when I made them. That's what she thought would work. Now, a very uncomfortable thing happened when my mother answered that question, is that I looked at my babies. That's them. On the screen, I put up a picture of my kids sitting happily on a bench. That's Gail, she's 3, and Dio, 1. I looked at them and I wondered, if they asked me this question 30 years from now, what would I say? How would I tell them that any type of choice that I made for them at that point was made with all the good intentions? And I also realized it would be very naive for me to think I would be perfect, because my mother thought she was perfect. Her mother wasn't present. So anything that she did for us was just like, my friends, I have done the absolute best, right? And definitely I'm going to do better for these guys. But still, there'll be something that they'll wake up and be like, hey, Mom, Apple, it didn't go too well. So I had to look back at what my mother said. And I realized a lot of the choices that she made were based out of fear. She wanted us to do better than she did, right? Her upbringing was a bit rough, and she had to really work to get hard out of it, right? But she could only get too far with everything that she had. So that's why she had to be like, you guys have to do this. You guys have to do that, because she probably didn't have anyone to tell her to do that, right? That was her fear. Her fear was, I need to make sure that you guys don't live in the poverty that I did, right? Her fear was, I need you to be at a certain level of society, one that I was never able to achieve. So a lot of these things are based out of fear. Which brings us to our first activity of this moment, of this day. As you've noticed, everyone has a pen and some sort of paper. But I want you to think about your fears. What are you harboring as a parent and parent-to-be about what this journey would look like for you? So take your time, be as reflective as you can. You can write 3 to 5 fears or more. I don't know how many you have in your in your hearts of hearts, but write them down and then we'll think about them after. Once I put out this question to the attendees, we each took some time to write down our fears and share them with the group. Up first to share her fear was Christine Namara, a single mom of a 5-year-old boy who works in the tech and venture capital space in Africa.
As a single mom, my primary fear is like poverty. It's like, oh, now I can't afford school fees. Now I can't. And there's like a standard that my mother set that I just would I don't even know. I don't know if I would be able to function if I didn't meet a standard higher than that for my son.
The fear of not being able to provide enough for our kids is something that haunts a lot of us. As Sylvia Masharia, an agricultural systems auditor and a mom of 1, shared, it could come from a prevalent scarcity mentality. Here's how she described it.
My third fear is not being able to provide for them. So myself or my husband not being able to provide for these children. And I realize this is maybe stemming from a lack mentality or a poverty mentality, just being always afraid of, gosh, what if something happens and you're not able to provide for them, you're not able to take them to better schools than we went to, you're not able to give them a better lifestyle than we had. And I can see how that is a lack mentality, but it's a fear that I sometimes have.
Namara is also afraid of who her son will remember her as.
And I think this comes from, again, being tied to being a single mom, which is like, I have to work. Part of my work is a lot of traveling. And then so it's kind of like, will he think, I saw her like once a quarter or whatever. Like, what's the memory he has of me?
I think we can all agree that we are afraid of being away from our kids, especially when you cannot help the absence because of factors like work. Edith, a data analyst and a mom of 1 boy, had to go back to work after maternity leave, and she struggled with this transition.
Being a working mom, sometimes, like you're in the office 8 to 5, there's a time for the commute, then there's also finding time for yourself. And then there's finding time for your partner or spouse, finding time for your friends. And in all this, you also have to find time for your child. So there's the fear that sometimes in choosing to do things for myself, he's missing out on time with me, and sometimes I feel guilty, and I'm like, okay, maybe I should be spending more time with him because he's still in his formative years and he needs mom. Or will he be, what society says is that you've let your child be raised by the house help or by the nanny, because he spends majority of his time in the care of the nanny. So am I not having enough of an influence on him because I'm not spending enough time with him?
For Sylvia, she's afraid of not being intentionally present for her kids.
And this is huge. This is huge because I actually quit my job just before I got pregnant. And when I got pregnant, I realized that I made the best decision in that season. And but I really battled with that decision when he was here. And now I'm thinking of provision. Now I'm thinking of what if something happens with my husband's business, and again, we have a one-income household, and the kid is here. What do you do? Yeah, so going back to work again, that means I'll have to spend less time with him. And the thought of him being raised by the nanny, and like that is the person who's going to have the most influence, I think, for a period of time, because this is the person he spends the most time with. That idea does not sit very well with me. And so I happened to go back to work, not because of this decision, not because of the decision to provide or anything, just because I felt I'm someone who, staying at home again, I don't know, I decided, let me try, see how it works. If it doesn't, I can always just, again, go back home. And be a stay-at-home mom for whatever period I feel comfortable. So right now, I'm really struggling with not being present in this child's life.
Another fear that a number of us shared was on being overprotective. For Mombi, a stay-at-home mom of her toddler, she said that this fear stems from her own complicated relationship with her own mother.
Half of my life, I think, the better part of my life, I used to live with my grandma. So when I started living with my mom, I was in high school. I was basically seeing her thrice a year. I wouldn't count that as living with her. But at the moment, now that I am an adult, I feel like she's trying to overcompensate for not being there. And sometimes I feel overloved. You see, the way you'd breastfeed your child is all over you and you feel touched out. I feel touched out by my mom's love. I'm like, no, you're being too much. Like, for instance, when I was giving birth, actually since when I got married, my mom was unable to accept that I am an adult. She'd constantly call, have you cooked for your husband? What have you cooked? Why are you guys having pancakes for dinner? I give birth. Okay, when I was almost giving birth, you've not gotten labor pains? I really think I need to be there. Who's going to be rubbing your back? I was, Nana, please. I do not want you there. You're the last person that I want there. But I didn't know how to tell her. It made me angry at everyone in the house. I used to constantly tell my husband, you have to do something about this. You have to know how to stall her. We had to lie. That I'm not yet at the hospital. I went there, tried induction, but she still thought I was at home. And I am so scared of loving my child that much. Now that I am a mommy, I think I kind of get where she comes from, but I do not want to do that to my child. I want to give my child space.
Edith also shared this fear, and for her, it could manifest as limiting her child's capabilities because of her own fears and anxieties.
Like, if he wants to do something that I am afraid of, and I stop him just because of my own fears or my own anxieties or because of what I think, because I think something is not right. Yeah, I just have a big fear of that. And now, because I am aware of that fear, I also think that I am an overthinker, naturally. So I will overthink my fear and then now let the reins loose and be like, okay, do whatever you want so that I don't limit you. Now I've overcorrected. And I give him too much space, too much leeway, which I think now also ties in with the fear of not finding a balance between being a friend and being an authoritarian. I might become too much of a friend that I'm not able to have any authority or tell him, don't do this, this is wrong, or guide him in a way where I pull you away from what I think is dangerous or what is not good for you or what is not the right path. I don't know, it's just hard, man. There's so many limits. Yes, you're supposed to be a friend, but don't be too much of a friend. Yes, you're supposed to have a stamp of authority, but don't be too hard on them. Like, it's just, so striking that balance and finding that is a very big fear of mine, that I'll do it wrong. And then 25, 30 years from now, I'm left regretting and thinking I can't go back in time. So each step of the way, I'm always overthinking, like, is this right? Is screen time wrong? Am I damaging his brain cells by letting him watch 20 minutes of TV so that I can put his food in the microwave, you know?
The battle between being your child's friend and an authoritative figure in their life is something that a number of us shared as well. A lot of us grew up with parents we feared, and this made it hard to confide in them. Shiko, a mom of two, definitely does not want this to be the case for her kids.
I don't want to be lost in being an authoritarian parent. This is what I want for you, and lose out on being a friend, because I feel like once that door is locked, it's very hard to open it again. I know I may not be the safe space every time, but I feel like I've been through so much. Why should she go to her age mates who will not give her sound advice rather than come to me? And then I'll have to remove the parenting coat that I'd pride in and be a friend, come down to her level and walk with her in that fear or space she's in.
Here's Mombi's take on this.
I'd really want my baby to know that even if mom is going to kill me, she is the first person I have to run to. No matter how bad this is, I really need to run to her first. In my mind, I might think that I am doing that, but maybe just to her, I am not doing that. Maybe the more I think I'm trying to bring her closer, I am actually chasing her away. I am so scared of that. And I would not wish to see her think that if I want to open up to something, let me just run to auntie. Let me just go find a therapist. It's okay to have those people, but can I be the first person that you come to and say, Mommy, this and this is happening in my life, this and this is happening in my life.
For our parents to be, their biggest fears were around figuring out the right values to bring up their kids with. Here's Michael, a software engineer and soon-to-be dad.
So for me, my first fear is making mistakes in their upbringing. In this sense, what I mean is like spoiling them, not instilling the right virtues. Who am I raising this person to be? What's the end product of after 18 years? Will they be able to live life without me being there?
And here's what his wife, Rose, a senior brand manager, thinks about this.
You see, the values we have now, we mostly got them from our parents, what they thought was right. And I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday, and I was saying, I know I'm married and all, but growing up, I think there was that pressure of, by 27, you have to be married, you need to have kids by 30. And there's nothing wrong with that, but that's not the path for everyone. And there's nothing wrong with a girl child who is 35. They've not been able to go through those transitions. But sometimes you feel like someone can feel like it's such a big mistake, or they're weird, or they're less because of the expectations or what your parents instilled in you. So for me, I think I'll try so hard not to. I know the values, like you have to be honest, you have to be, truthful, you have to be respectful. Those ones, of course, we'll try and instill. But there's the things that I think, like having a blank check that there's nothing wrong if your life takes a different turn. There's nothing wrong with you taking breaks, like in the middle of like your path to figure things out. I think we didn't have that growing up. You had to have your things figured out. And I think that I'm very conscious that as we raise our children, let's not kuekelea values on them that probably we don't even know why we do what we do. Because if you're asked, why do you do some things that you don't, why do you want your daughter or your son to do? You don't know. It's just because you were raised thinking that's the right way, but according to whose textbook? So I think having a balance of instilling those values and also not overstepping as a parent so that you give them freedom to succeed in whatever they want to do. I think that's something that I'll really be keen on.
Rose and my husband shared a very particular fear with society. For her, it was about the lack of control with everything that society brings. And for my husband, it was all about societal expectations.
See the things that happen in society that you don't have control over. You can raise your child in church, in the mosque, all that. Then they grow up and then they take a 360. They get into drugs, or they tell you, Mom, I like saying watermelon. I hope you get what I mean. Then what do you do? Because at that point you're so helpless. Maybe they are 18 and above. I don't know, because that's a probability. And as much as you do your best, you don't know how really your child will turn out when they're adults and they're in uni. You're not seeing them every day. So it's just, I think you just do your best and you pray when they get there that the values you'll have instilled in them will carry them along that particular patch.
There's a lot of that society expects from a person. So things like, because you are this age, you need to be getting married. Because you're this age, you need to have children. Because you're this age, yes. And I know as a parent, and especially coming from a conservative family as well, I know that that's something I know I'll have that pressure as well that I'd want to put on them, in the sense that, okay, you're getting to this age, I'd want you to have, bring me kids, for example. So I don't want to put that pressure on them, but I know it's something that I may be forced to fight with as well.
Something else that resonated with us is either passing down our own parental trauma from our upbringing or causing fresh trauma to our kids. Shiko, a digital marketer and mom of two, admitted to carrying a lot of trauma from her parents. And the idea of transferring that to her kids is crippling.
I think I read a quote by Jackie Hill Perry where if you don't heal, you'll basically transfer your wounds to your children. And I think for me, feeling the weight of my wounds, imagining I'm transferring the same weight to an innocent child, basically coming from the point that I didn't have an ideal upbringing, which of course has, I've come to accept that it has made me who I am. So I'm not in the point of denial, but unknowingly transferring the wounds that majorly would come from mommy wounds. I think that for me is one great fear that I think I am hoping to deal with, probably therapy, so that I'm not transferring those things that you say, those things, my mom didn't do this, my mom didn't do that. I don't want, because we'll basically transfer them to them.
One thing that we have to be cognizant about is causing trauma to our own kids. Sylvia talks about possibly doing this by the decisions that they would make as parents.
Sometimes there are choices you can make in life and you don't know how this is going to affect your child, because you can see that even with our parents, there are some choices they made, they thought were the best choices. And you sitting here 20 years later, 30 years later, you're like, no. Yeah, that was not it. Yeah, so also being afraid of making some choices, and they have this wound that they need to get over. They need to go to therapy because mom did or dad did.
For Namara, how much would her son have to unlearn from her?
I think a lot of being an adult is like, that wasn't the right mental model for how you think about money because my mom or my dad did ABC. Oh, this is not how you speak to people, but my mom used to shout in the house. And I'm just like, wow, how much undoing will he have to do as an adult? And what do I need to do for him to not have to spend time unlearning things he learned from being my son?
I think it's also fair to say that a big fear is of us getting scarred by our kids. What if everything we give to them is not enough? For Mombi, one fear she has is, quote unquote, her best.
Me thinking that I am doing my best, but her having a different perspective of what my mom's best should be. I think I want to be a perfect mommy.
Here's Namara's take on it.
And I think the last one is resentment on my part. It's a huge fear. You know, it's when you're like, oh, I sacrificed my body and my time, but then no one asked you. And now you have to grapple with why you're angry, why you're resentful, why you feel like, you know, you've wasted years, why you feel like... And so really trying to be deliberate about not giving more than I have to give, because it does turn into resentment. So I'm quite conscious about that generally.
I know the world cannot be perfect, but it has seemed safer in previous years. We could say that because we weren't there, but right now the world seems a little bit crazy. And that's something that Mike is afraid of.
It is a crazy world, and it's not the same world I grew up in. I think my issues during my childhood may be bullying, maybe being ostracized by other kids. Now there's drugs. Now the prevalence of abuse is very high, both physical and emotional. It's crazy to think about how are you going to protect them from all these things. You can't. They'll be in school at some point. You're not going to be sitting next to them. They'll meet new people. You don't know what these people are, how these people are raised, and what values they will now introduce to this kid.
I definitely relate to this fear with Mike. I remember some time back walking to the neighborhood shop to grab something and spotting a group of men sitting under a tree. It took me back to those childhood days where I would make similar trips and try and find alternative and always longer or less convenient routes to avoid such men, because I knew that they would make me uncomfortable. Now there I was walking outside and I thought of my daughter doing this. I couldn't help but feel like I would definitely want to protect her from this. To close off the fears, I want to share two that my husband shared with the group that were really intriguing. One of them was not exposing our kids to as much as possible. Here's what he means by that.
I feel as if not exposing them to as much as they can, it's limiting in one way or another. There's this interesting thing or encounter we had where there was this person who had gone to Antarctica. You remember? Yeah, and then you're like, you guys even go to Antarctica? Like it's on the book. Like people can do that, yeah. So I know maybe that's a push, but if they want to, is it something they can have exposure to? So I don't want them to just be limited to one thing or one place because that's what dad can afford. And then the last one is considering me a failure when my kids grow up and then they're like, Dad, we don't think you're as cool as you are. When right now they're always there. They always think they always want your presence in the sense. But now when they're in their teenager years, will they think of when they're 6? When they're 6, not even that. Yo. I wish I thought I had some more time. Yeah, 3 years only. Yo.
All right, we will take a short break here, and maybe you can be thinking about your own fears. What is it that you're afraid of? What mistakes are you afraid of making? When we come back, we will try and conquer those fears. Welcome back. In the first part of the episode, you had a group of parents talk about the fears that they carry on their parenting journey. A lot of these fears might be very relatable to you. And during that session, we tried to identify some tools that we could use to face those fears and come out on the other side feeling a little bit more confident about our journey. Some of the tools I shared included taking small and consistent actions, labeling our fears to understand what we need to deal with, finding a different perspective, and most importantly, trusting yourself. For Sylvia, prayer is a big thing.
When I'm so helpless and there's nothing I can do, especially with the world being crazy as it is, I think for me that's what sometimes keeps me sane, because that's what I'll turn to. With things I'm not able to control, I'll just turn to prayer.
Another fear that she shared was possibly scarring her kids with the choices that she makes. But she believes that intentionality might help with this.
And I think just as a parent, you always think of your children, you always think of your child with every single decision that you make. So I think that's intentionality, just being very intentional with most of my decisions. I might not always know what's best for this child. And with my personality, that's a bit tough, because I'm working towards it. Sometimes my mom will tell me something, and my first reaction is to, nope, I know what's best. But then a day later or 2 days later, I go back to her, actually, it actually worked. What you told me to do actually worked, So I'm getting to a point of accepting that actually I'll not always know what's best for this child or these children. And even with the nanny, I might be very quick to know, I want you to do 1, 2, 3 exactly the way I want it to be done. But she'll try something and it works. And I'm like, what do you mean? I thought my way was the best way, and it will not always be that way. So just getting to that point of acceptance that someone else also knows what's best for this child.
Edith shared this as well. For her, acceptance will play a big role in conquering her fears.
And also accepting that I will make mistakes. Accepting that, yes, I'm doing it with the best intentions, but it might be a mistake down the line. I might regret choosing to do something, but also giving myself the grace to know that you did your best, and now going forward, you can correct it by making a different choice or choosing a different path for him.
Another thing that was common for us is bettering ourselves first in order to be the best for our kids.
Yeah, I'll start with what's happening today, that I'll equip myself, not just wing the parenting idea, because as I was coming, I called my friend and I told her, I need to fill my cup, because mothering and being everything else in the community is about giving. So equip myself by coming for such events, hearing how other mothers are doing it, and not just be in my own bubble and dying in mom guilt. Like listening to you watching your child, it sounds easy, but it's so hard to realize your child can actually survive apart from you and actually thrive. But they're very humbling moments. I'm still dealing with that. So sometimes I listen to children's psychologists to understand my child at this age, what are their needs, how do they reason, so that we meet somewhere. Because recently before I'd threatened my daughter, nitakuchapa. So recently I did that. She was on the ground. She looked at me straight and she'd be like, Mommy, no chapa. And she had no fear. I was like, wow. I even laughed to just make that moment not awkward. Because before she'd be so scared and everything. And I was like, wow, raising someone very independent, I think for me is big, because as we were taught how to be very scared, be in a corner, but the boardroom in the world does not need you to be in a corner. So I think that for me is big.
I think having a learning mindset, because I don't think anyone was born knowing how to parent. You learn a day at a time, a phase at a time. So right now, my worry right now is when this child comes, how will they survive the first 3 months? I was telling my husband that now we will have to put the PS away, the PlayStation away, to ensure that this child is breathing. Like that's my worry right now. About school, about sijui, what else? We will deal with it when it comes. So eating the cake a bite at a time. I think for me that's how I want to approach this whole thing, and also just having an open mindset, being open even to learning from, you can't pick everything from your parents or your friends, but there's 1 or 2 things you can learn, and just not being a know-it-all,
One thing that I would never imagine my father being is relaxed and chill, especially when it came to things my sister and I would do. For the 2 dads in our group, this learned idea of what an African father is something that they said they would try and avoid. For my husband, being truthful is going to be very important.
Be truthful. I think that's what I've written. Be truthful to them, and they will be truthful to you as well. So they can come and just tell you, Dad, I made a mistake. I did this thing I wasn't supposed to do. And, Dad makes mistakes, I make mistakes. It's fine. People do make mistakes. They're comfortable with that reality, that it's okay to make a mistake. And, just dust yourself up, wake up, and move on.
I would like them to know that it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay not to be okay. It's okay to make mistakes. Mistakes do not define you. It's how you overcome them that builds you up. To teach them that these things are okay. No, there's nothing wrong if you mess up. You can come to us, and it's an open door policy. As in, I want them to have something different than feeling like, hey, nimefanya hii kitu, hey, Dad is going to be mad, or Mom is going to be mad, nitachapwa. Like, it's okay. Like, let's talk about it. Let's figure it out. Let's try and see where you messed up. How can we correct? Yeah.
For Namara, it is important for her to understand that she is not everything.
I think for me, it's just one thing, which I realized when my son was 6 months or so. I was just like, hold on. Why have I suddenly made up in my mind that I'm God? Like I can be everything. Yeah. You can be all the things, you know. Yeah. So, wake up early, run to work, be there at 6, come back at 3, try to bath time, bedtime. I was like, hold on. Who told you you can be everything at the same time? It's not possible. Mm-hmm. And so at that point, kind of making the decision that the only way to be the best for him is to be the best for myself. And so for me, all of the solutions to my fears is always to look internally, and to understand, why am I worried about providing? This hasn't happened once in the last 20 years. Why is that your primary fear? What data points are you using to justify these things that you're thinking? Most of it is coming from within. And once you solve that line of thought, you're able to pour out a fresher reality into your child, into your job, into whatever else you're doing. Fear is not data. It's a data point, but it doesn't tell you the whole story. And the only way for you to get the whole story is to look within. So for me, that was just like, oh gosh, I can't, this whole thing that society has done to parents, where you have to have some level of delusions of grandeur and like a God complex, where you're like, oh, I can't control the weather, I can't control the humans outside, I can't control the it's like, you can never be expected to be that, and you aren't in many other aspects of your life. And so I just accept that I'm not perfect. I rely very much on my ecosystem. My nanny, I have zero qualms with the situation. Like, I rely heavily on her. She stays with my son when I'm out of town. My friends, my sister, and my son is a very happy child, and I'm perfectly comfortable with that. I'm also comfortable with the fact that I make lots of mistakes. Like, I'm always learning, I'm always growing. But the thing that I want him to see on the other side is like, I will get annoyed, I will yell, then I'll be like, wow, sorry, I was shouting. Wow, yeah, sometimes mommy, sometimes sometimes I be losing my nuts. But I apologize. That's not how people are supposed to act. I'm not supposed to shout at you. And I'm like, do you forgive me? Yes. So that's like, I wouldn't be perfect, but I need him to know, to not hold me to the standard we held our parents, where you're like, oh, and then when you look back, you're like, ugh. You're like, bruh, are you serious? Guy, hata ulikuwa hivyo, are you serious? So I need him to look back and be like, oh, she would, I mess up, I say sorry. Yeah. I tell him when I'm traveling, I explain why. I explain why I have to be away, explain why he's here or there. So it's very much just demystifying myself as a human, and just, I'm not God. I'm just a babe that you live with that has to make some of these decisions.
An interesting fear that was brought up earlier by a couple of parents was on us holding resentment because of the many physical, emotional, financial changes, or some might even say disruptions, that a child can cause in your life. This resentment can also turn into our kids looking at us as failures. Here's Shiko's take on this.
When I got married, and then I left my job with no idea of where I'm going and what I'm doing or who I am. I think I was just in that phase. But the society wants you all of a sudden to know where you're supposed to be. But I was in a space where I actually need to sit down and think, where am I heading? So when I knew when I was a child, not a child really, but in high school, I want to be a stay-at-home mom. I tried. And then I realized I don't want to be the parent who tells my child, I'm not where I wanted to be because of you. You know those parents who say, kama si wewe ningekuwa na shamba mingi Runda. I don't want to be that parent. Did I want to do this? I need to live. I'm a mom, yes. I'm a wife, but I need to live my life. I am a person at the end of the day. So I think for me what is big is to be an achiever, live out my dreams, that when my child sees me, they're like, that's my mom. Yeah, not hide somewhere and be like, namjua. But we are going to walk home together.
Parents receive a lot of unsolicited advice from literally anyone. Even a stranger in a car or in the streets will have opinions on how you should raise your kids, what you expose them to, and what choices you should make for them. One of the tools I shared was on detaching yourself from the noise and trusting in what you believe in.
There's the idea of no nanny. Like when I took my daughter to daycare, I think we resonate on the same page. I remember my parents were like, no, it's not good. Is it too early? Even recently, a cab driver just yesterday asked me, umempeleka shule mapema hivi? Najua mtoto sahi anataka joto ya mama. I'm like, there's always someone second guessing your steps as much as you have sat down and thought through. And it's hard, it's not easy. So I think just detaching from the noise and saying this is my process. Even if my mom speaks into the space, I'm willing to tell them, yes, what you think is okay, but I have done this for this and that, and I'm okay with the decision. Even me going back to work, many people will be like, no, the way you raise the firstborn is not how you're raising the secondborn. Don't you think it will have an issue? But in my head, I'm like, I have a life to live, and I cannot live 50-50 because I am a parent. I don't want to be a miserable parent.
Trust is a big thing in parenting. One of the fears that Rose held was that the values that they would bring up in their kids would not be enough to protect them from the world. For this, she tapped into her own childhood.
So, funny thing is, I grew up at the coast, and I left home when I was, I think, in class 5. And I think I see my parents once a year. I came to Nairobi. I didn't know. I had relatives, but I was practically alone. And I keep asking myself, why is it that I'm not perfect, but I didn't turn out so bad? I think I'm a normal Kenyan citizen. I don't have a criminal record. And I was gallivanting this Nairobi. I'm telling you, my parents are back at home. So one thing that I remembered is my dad, when I was young, there's something he told me, and I'm going to now go into the spiritual, religious part, is there's a verse in the Bible that says, raise your children in the ways of the Lord, and when they grow up, they'll never depart from it. See, my parents growing up, and I'm very spiritual, they ensured we were around things of God, things of Christ, and that instilled some fear in me. Even when I was miles and miles away, I would never go to certain kind of parties. I would never hang out to certain kind of people because it just felt wrong in my conscience, So for me, I think that's one thing I discussed with my husband, and I said, our children or our child, whichever God gives us, I will deliberately, with his support, take our children to church, because I feel like it did something for me, and I think it instilled some fear of going in another way. So apart from that, that's the best I can do. And then past that, I think I'll just leave everything else to God, because there's so much you can do. And once kids grow up and they go into the society, you just hope whatever you've taught them from when they were young, they'll stick to it.
For Edith, a change of perspective is important.
And then also there's what you said about finding a different perspective. By him spending time with the nanny, spending time with my siblings who also help out a lot in babysitting and all that, looking at it from a different perspective is seeing that he's very good with other people. He has not been at a point where he's so attached to me that he cannot be left with anybody else. And that's something that maybe I need to look at more and see that's a positive side of him being raised by other people or having a community that is helping me raise him.
I am a believer in law of attraction. I am a believer in manifesting. I am a believer of the universe gives me what I give it. Can I stop dwelling in these fears? Can I ask myself, you talked about, on one of the tools, you talked about seeing this from a different perspective. Instead of asking myself, what if this goes wrong? I should start asking myself, what if this goes right? What if 20 years from now, my child sits and says, damn, my mommy was the best. I would not wish to be born any other way. I would not have wished for this to go any other way. My mom helped me make the best decisions. My mom helped me be the best I can. My mom shaped the person that I am today. And as a believer of the law of attraction, that is something that I'm supposed to start putting out there. That is the energy I'm supposed to start sending to the universe. Let me make it known that this is what I want to do. This is how I want to do it. And it will happen. It will happen. It has to go as per how I want it to. It doesn't always have to be that bad. I want to start consciously reminding myself, every time I ask myself, what if I traumatize my child? I will always solve that by asking myself, what if I do not traumatize my child?
Our dad-to-be Mike also chooses to trust himself and work closely with his wife to raise up confident kids, something my husband is also very keen on.
For me, to deal with my fears, I choose to trust myself. In whatever I do, my intentionality is in the right. My heart is in the right place. I cannot control everything. I can only control the now, and I trust myself to do the right thing, bring up with the right values, make the right choices. So I choose to trust myself. And for the important values that I would want to pass down or them to have and why, this is parenting is a teamwork, and I feel like me and my wife are yin and yang. So we'll leverage both our sides. For me, I would love for our children to be very strong-willed like her. She's that person. She's a go-getter. She's a go-getter. I think you know that.
I really resonated when she said we cower down as I think children of African upbringing. I don't know if it's African or Kenyan or particular upbringings. Maybe I'm also stereotyping it, so let me not stereotype it, but particular upbringing. I resonate with that personally because I feel as if sometimes I do cower down, especially at the workplace. And within the workplace, and even not only the workplace, but also life, children need to be confident and proud and not limited, so limiting beliefs to what they can do and what their capabilities. And that comes from a strong belief system. So giving them that strong belief system, and that belief system born of truth. So just believing in what you are, accepting what you are, knowing who you are, having a place you always know you can come back home and say, by the way, ata kukiwa kubaya aje, I have home. I think that's what I'd want us to build and create for them, so that then when they get out there, they are confident, they are strong, they are willful people, and yeah. I know I'd have wanted to go on and on and on, but I'll stop for now. Yeah.
I really enjoyed that session. As nervous as I was putting it together, in the end, it proved to be a very valuable thing. I want to thank everyone who came to this sit down. Your contribution has given a voice to a lot of what we feel and provided us with the confidence we need to tackle our own fears. Here's some great news. I plan on hosting another event very soon. I am super excited about that, and I would really love it if you could come. I'll share more details about this soon, so make sure to follow this podcast on Instagram and TikTok on Mama Tales Podcast, and definitely subscribe to our newsletter. Some great things happen there. You can find a link to that on our website, that's mamatalespodcast.com, or in the show notes of this episode. Next week, we will listen to Michelle's story, a mom who is working hard to have it all. I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.